Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Answer Is You podcast. Here we want to discuss every week little topics on how to improve relationships. I just started this podcast, and it was for me really about finding a platform where I can just share little tips that really help me improve relationships, specifically the relationship with myself, and with that improve all the relationships in my life. And it's so essential. I feel like relationships are always our opportunity to see where there's still things we need to look at so we can heal, so we can grow, so we can evolve. So just want to share from my last week, because I thought it would be nice to just share from a personal perspective and maybe link that to the topic that I want to discuss today. My dog is, by the way, she's always laying like right next to me, so if you hear some weird sounds in the background, it's always her. So what came up with me in my life last week, first of all, I'm following astrology, and they were all saying, or maybe it does fit in, because now that I actually connect the dots and I did not even realize it. So apparently, and I do not want to get this wrong, but I know there was some shifts happening with Jupiter, and apparently that highlights the way we communicate. So that actually fits right in, and I did not even connect the dots. So perfect. So last week, actually, the topic communication showed up for me, and it showed up for me in a way where I was extremely triggered. And normally, since I work so much on myself, I am able to really, of course, it's not like I'm never angry or anything. Of course not. Everyone is angry, and everyone is supposed to be angry, because anger allows us to see where boundaries are crossed and where there's something we can heal, or where we can shift the emotion or let it work through us. Either way. So last week there was someone who is part of my life. They always be part of my life. And in the past there was a lot of gaslighting happening, and normally I would definitely say, if that's like a constant thing in your life, when someone is gaslighting you and they can't work through it, they can't reflect on it and can't improve it, that is definitely someone you should question yourself if they should be part of your life. For me, that is a little different, because that is a person that I'm not deciding for them to be part of my life, but they just are. So let's put it like that. So with that, there was stuff coming up last week where I felt really triggered, and I felt gaslit again by that person. After a lot confusing back and forth communication, where I felt like, oh my God, that could have been so easy, but it was just not. Because I also feel like, so we want to talk about communication and how to improve communication today. I think it's always so important for us, no matter who we're talking to, that we communicate clearly so we can receive a clear response. And for me, it was really, I shared something and asked a question, and it would have been, for me, pretty clear how the answer would have been to that, but it was just not. It was a lot of back and forth, and I was just not, there was just a lot of stuff that triggered me in that communication. And with that, it triggered a lot of the past for me. And I feel like when you are in relationships and there's big disconnects in the way you communicate, and there's maybe trauma that showed up, or emotional abuse, whatever it is, there's always that point where there is like something showing up for you again, where of course for me too, it was my opportunity to look at it and heal it. But I was really triggered. I was triggered for days, and I was really annoyed with everyone because of it. And I knew that it was because of that communication, because it brought up a deep pain. It brought up a deep pain again, because I've been through it and I felt not seen, and I felt like it could have been handled different. And I felt again how I felt so often in the past, that it was just pushed back at me like I was the one not communicating the right way. So there was a lot of pain that showed up for me. And coming back to the astrology, so we have Jupiter where it is about communication. So if there is something showing up for you right now, just pay attention to it. So maybe there is an opportunity for you to strengthen the way you communicate with others in a better way. Or maybe others have to communicate with you better and you can reflect that back to them. But the other thing is, last week apparently was, and I never heard of it, there was the Silver Gate happening. I hope I say that correctly. I follow foreverconscious.com. They always have weekly forecast about energy, and I love it. And I think it was called the Silver Gate, and that was about deep healing. And I could really feel, because what is happening when a lot of healing energy is coming in, we have the opportunity to look at something that is not healed. And that was that for me. There was still a lot of pain from the past with that person stored in my body. And it actually, and I want to bring that up because it was so transformative. I had one night that I actually woke up and I thought I had a panic attack, or my heart would stop beating. And I could not really comprehend what it was. I really couldn't comprehend what it was. I was just sitting there and I was terrified, and I normally never am terrified. Even if there is like stuff with my body happening where I was just like, oh, it's kind of concerning, but I normally am never terrified, but I was. And the next evening after that, so I was sitting with that all day because it was intense. I had a sound immersion. I had a group and a sound immersion, and I could still feel like this feeling of like being terrified. I still carried that in my heart because I mean it was intense. But then also being immersed in those healing frequencies, it finally came to me, it came to mind, and it came intuitively, just the message that this is how I always felt in that relationship back then. And that moment when I woke up in that night, it just brought that feeling up again, because I felt so powerless in that relationship back then. And it really felt like it was sucking the life out of me. And I'm just sharing that vulnerably because I want, with this episode, for people to pay attention to how they communicate, but maybe also to where they gotta set a boundary. And if there is someone in your life, and I know I said that in the beginning, for me it's different, but if there is someone in your life who is gaslighting you, or who cannot see their part in conflict, then that is a problem. And it will cost you a lot of energy from your own energy that you could use for something else, something that is good for you and good for your heart. But you decide, when you stay in relationships or in communication with someone who does not understand you, who does not have the awareness to understand you, who does not want to understand you, it really is, like I said, it sucks the life out of you, because you will not make someone else understand. they either want to understand you or they don't, or they do not have the capacity to. And we have to accept that. So that's just, for me, something personal. And coming back to improving relationships in regards to communication. So, I mean, there's so many things, but I feel like communication is key always to improving relationships. So I thought I'd just start with 4 things that I really think is essential in improving relationships. Number 1 is that you share vulnerably how you feel. Number 2 is that you share from the I perspective. And I will get into all of them. Number 3, that you share how you feel. And also, number 4, that you tune in how you feel during the communication. So number 1, I mean, share vulnerably. This is pretty straightforward, but most of the time it's still not for us. So it really means sharing from your heart. It kind of blends into sharing from the I perspective. So we can kind of put them together, but it's really about going away from, even when we feel hurt, when we are in conflict, it will never help you to work through a conflict when you say to the other person, but you did this. But back then, when we went out and saw those other people, you acted like this and this upset me. Or you made a weird comment or whatever. The moment we put the blame on the other person and point at the other person, they will close off and they will not hear us anymore. So this is why most of the time, well, this is why a lot of people say, when you point one finger at the other person, 3 fingers point back at you. Because the moment we make the other person responsible, we do not see our part in it. So sharing vulnerably is really sharing from your heart. And with that, coming to the I perspective, sharing how things make you feel. Because that's also the only thing that no one can take away from us. Of course, if you have someone who's gaslighting you, they do not understand how you feel, and they also do not care to some degree. But let's put it that way, if it's someone who cares about you and you share from the I perspective, and in general, even if it's a coworker who might not just be someone close to you, but the moment you share from the I perspective, you share something from within yourself. And most people can relate, and they do not close off because they know when you share from the I perspective, or they do not know, they feel it, that you are the one, even if there's conflict, you are leaning in, you're staying open. Because the moment we point at someone else, they close off, but we close off too. Because we're just like, well, you're responsible for this, so I'll push you away, and I'll push myself away, or not push myself away, but I close myself off too, because you're the one responsible, you hurt me, so you fix it. You fix it, and I'll just be here hiding, or I'll just be here protecting myself until you fix it. But this is not how we move closer toward each other. This is really happening when we stay in the I perspective and really share, this is how it made me feel. This is what it reminded me of from my childhood, and this is why this is painful for me. Or this is painful to me because I went through it in my last relationship, and I shared with you that this is important to me because of that, or because of this. It really is about sharing from our hearts and sharing from the I perspective. This is how that made me feel. this is what came up for me in my mind, or this is the thoughts that went through my head, and this is why that felt painful to me. This is why it upset me. Make it about yourself. And share from your heart. Share the emotion that came across, even if that's hard for you. But the moment you lean in, you give the other person the opportunity to lean into. And the beautiful thing is, there might be something that someone did that was hurtful to you, but maybe there was already something that happened before that that made them pull away, that made them react in that situation the way they did, because something else that you did not even realize already hurt them previously. And the moment you're vulnerable and share, this is how that made me feel when you reacted like that, they can lean in and have the opportunity to share what might have made them act in that way. So it creates this new space to be more vulnerable. And to share from the I perspective also shows the other person that you know that you're responsible for the way the communication is going as well. Because we are always responsible for a conflict that cannot be resolved in a calm way, that cannot be resolved in any way but us screaming at each other. Because the moment people scream or start being loud or start getting angry, it's because they do not feel heard by the other person. So they get louder and louder because they want to just communicate how they feel. But instead of communicating how they feel, they just keep pushing the ball in the other corner rather than sharing how they feel. So sharing from the I perspective and sharing vulnerably how you feel is definitely a huge way to improve communication for any type of relationship. And what did I say? So I said sharing, vulnerably sharing from the I perspective. I also said, what did I say? Oh my God. I didn't want to talk about boundaries, but it kind of blends into it. It's about sharing or feeling into how a communication makes you feel. I think that was my last point, but we stick with that for now. Because I feel like boundaries are like a separate topic, but it's really about us when we are in communication and there is conflict arising, to tune in how it makes you feel in a way where you cannot just communicate how you feel, but when you're in conflict and you get triggered, you can just tune into how you feel in between. Because I mean, this does not have to be resolved in 5 minutes, but internally focus on you if it's too much. Maybe it's a conflict that brings up a lot of triggers for you, like I shared in my example from last week. And then it's very important, and I mean that blends into creating boundaries. If you are tuning into your body and you're feeling extremely overwhelmed by that conflict, then share that with the other person. Maybe it even calls you for creating the boundary of saying, maybe we can revisit that at a later time because I feel very triggered right now and I feel not safe. And it's not you that makes me feel unsafe, but I do not feel safe internally. So I do not really know how to respond properly at this time. And when you communicate like this, it shares, like in the other examples, it shares from the I perspective something about you internally that is completely neutral to the other person. They might actually have even more compassion for you because they see like, oh my God, they're working through something that apparently is very intense for them, but they do not want to keep talking about it. And then they see you and the whole situation from a whole different perspective. So it's very important to really tune in, especially in conflict or when there's like fights happening, that you tune into how you feel and then you pull back if needed. Yeah, so we have sharing vulnerably, sharing from the I perspective, and tuning into your body. Honestly, I feel like this is really the main focus to really start improving relationships and start improving communication within relationships. I honestly cannot remember the third point that I brought up. It probably blends into one another as it is, because it really is, it's like a topic where one blends into the other, and it really, communication is changing drastically if we start placing our focus on sharing from the I perspective and sharing vulnerably how we feel. I hope this was helpful, and I'll definitely see what point I forgot about communication, but there's so many subtopics when it comes to communication, so I will definitely share more another time about this. I hope this was helpful for you guys. Please let me know in the comments if you like this episode. If you want to hear more on how to improve communication within relationships, I think this is profound, and it was so helpful for me to really improve the way I show up in communication and in conflict situation with other people, and really share from the I perspective and really keep my heart open to resolve difficult conversations in a whole different way. And it's so healing for both people involved in that communication. So I hope you have a wonderful week. I see you in the next episode.